Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to take complex topics, dig through the sources, and really pull out the essential stuff you need.
And today we're tackling something that, well, it really taps into a pretty common feeling.
Right. That question that pops up maybe on a Sunday night or Monday morning.
Exactly. What if this whole work until you're 65 thing isn't the only way? What if you didn't have to trade, 40 years just for a paycheck?
That idea, retiring maybe decades early, that's the big shiny promise behind the movement we're looking at today. FIRE.
Financial independence, retire early. Yep. And our sources really show it's this intense financial strategy. It looks like a lifestyle dream maybe, but underneath.
It's practical. Really practical and really popular, especially with younger, often high-earning folks.
Right. So our mission today is to get past the buzzwords. We need to define FIRE, sure, but really dig into the mechanics, the math, the rule.
How do people actually pull this off in just, say, 10 or 15 years?
Exactly. We'll explore the strategies, and they are intense, the different ways people approach it, the sort of flavors of FIRE.
And importantly, the risks. Because this isn't easy. There are definitely challenges involved in making this work for decades.
Absolutely. So if you've heard FIRE and thought it sounded a bit, well, out there,
stick with us. We're going to unpack the financial engine behind that ambition.
Let's start where you have to start. Financial independence. The FI part. Yeah, looking at FIRE, FIRB, everyone focuses on the retire early bit, don't they?
It's the exciting part.
It is. But the thing is, the RE is totally dependent on the FI. You absolutely have to nail financial independence first.
Makes sense. You can't just stop working if the money isn't there.
Precisely. So that distinction is key. Okay, so let's define it. What is financial independence, really? It's got to be more than just having, a decent savings account.
Right.
Financial independence. It's that state where you have enough income coming in to pay for all your living expenses.
For how long?
For the rest of your life. And here's the crucial bit. That income has to be generated without you needing to work a job.
Okay, so no active employment.
Right. Or being dependent on others.
That really flips the script, doesn't it? Most people trade their time, their hours, for money.
Exactly. FI means you've built a system where your money is doing the work, your assets are generating the cash flow you need to live.
So you get to decide what to do with your time.
That's the core idea. And the way your money works for you is through something called passive income. That's the engine here.
Passive income. Explain that a bit more.
It's money you earn from assets you own. So think investments, stocks, bonds, or maybe rental properties. Things that make money without you needing to, clock in every day.
Okay. So for FIRE specifically, what are the main sources people are aiming for?
Well, looking at the sources, it's overwhelmingly focused on income from a diversified investment portfolio. That's dividends, capital gains, maybe bond interest.
Right.
And then secondarily, sometimes real estate income, like from rental properties. The key is that it should be relatively reliable and not demand a ton of your active time to manage.
So you hit financial independence when that passive income year after year
is reliably more than what you spend each year, your annual living expenses.
And that's the point where working becomes a choice.
A choice, not a necessity. Yeah. And that shift, that's the foundation of the whole thing. Suddenly, every hour is yours again.
But how do people know they've really reached that point? Especially if they plan to be retired for, say, 50 or 60 years, there must be some math involved.
Oh, absolutely. You can't just guess. To understand how people plan for that kind of time frame, we need to look at the mathematical core of the FIRE movement.
Okay, so if the goal is passive income expenses, how do you figure out the target? How much money do you actually need, saved up and invested, before you can safely walk away from work?
Right. This is where we get to probably the single most important number or rule in the whole FIRE conversation. It's essential. It's called the 4% rule.
It's a 4% rule. Heard of it. Let's break it down. What's the 4% refer to?
So this rule came out of some research, most famously the Trinity study back in the late 90s. And it basically suggests this. You can safely withdraw 4% of your total investment portfolio value in your first year of retirement.
Okay, 4% of the starting amount.
Yes. And then in subsequent years, you adjust that dollar amount for inflation. And the study found there's a very high probability your money will last for at least 30 years, often longer.
Okay, let's make that concrete. If my annual expenses are, say, $40,000.
Right. And if $40,000 is 4% of your portfolio.
And I need carry the one.
Yeah.
$1 million invested.
Exactly. You got it. The quick math is take your desired annual expenses and multiply by 25. Because 1 divided by 0.04 is 25.
The 25X rule. I've seen that.
That's the one. It's the same logic. Need $30,000 a year, aim for $750,000 invested, want to live on $80,000. You're shooting for $2 million.
That gives people a concrete target number, a really big number usually.
It's a big number, yeah, especially if you're young. But having that number is critical for planning.
But the study said 30 years, right?
Yeah.
What if you retire at 35? You might need that money to last 50, 60 years. Is 4% still safe then? I know our sources raise this exact point.
That's a huge question and a valid criticism. Is the 4% rule safe for very early retirement? The main worry here is something called sequence of returns risk.
Okay, sequence of returns risk. Explain that one. Sounds important.
It's incredibly important, maybe the biggest financial risk for an early retiree. The Trinity study looked at historical periods, and over 30 years, market ups and downs tend to average out.
Right.
But sequence risk is about when the bad years happen. If you get hit with a nasty recession or a market crash right after you retire...
In those first few years.
Exactly. In those first, say, 5 or 10 years, you're still withdrawing your 4% plus inflation, but you're selling assets when their value is way down.
So you have to sell more shares, a bigger chunk of your portfolio, just to get the same amount of cash.
Precisely. And that can do permanent damage. Your portfolio shrinks dramatically right at the start, and it might never recover enough to last those 50 or 60 years.
Ouch. So for someone retiring at 65 for 30 years, it's a risk, but maybe less catastrophic?
It's still a risk, but they have a shorter timeline. For someone retiring at 35, aiming for 60 years of retirement, a bad sequence early on could completely derail the entire plan. It's a much higher stake.
So how do FIRE proponents deal with that? Just cross their fingers?
Well, the prudent ones don't. To account for that longer time frame and sequence risk, many people aiming for very early retirement use a more conservative withdrawal rate.
So what at 4%?
Yeah, maybe 3.5%, or some even go down to 3.25% or 3.3%.
So instead of multiplying expenses by 25.
They might multiply by 28 or even 30. So if you needed $1 million with the 4% rule, you might aim for closer to $1.15 or $1.2 million with a 3.5% rule.
That builds in a bigger safety buffer.
It does. It adds a cushion. And when you're planning for potentially 6 decades without a paycheck, that kind of prudence is, well, pretty non-negotiable, according to many sources.
Okay, so knowing the target is 25 to 30 times your annual expenses. That explains why the strategy to get there has to be so intense, especially if you want to do it in 10 or 15 years.
Exactly. Which leads us right into how they actually do it, the core strategies, right? Think about hitting $1 million or maybe more by your mid-30s if you only really start saving seriously in your mid-20s.
That's a huge amount of money in a very short time.
It is. So you have to basically supercharge the whole wealth building process. And the FIRE approach does this through essentially 3 core pillars applied simultaneously and very aggressively.
Okay, pillar 1. This feels like the main engine. It's that savings rate, right?
The extremely high savings rate, yes. Forget the standard advice, save 10%, save 15%.
That's for a normal retirement timeline, like 40 years of working and saving.
Precisely. That 10-15% assumes you have 4 decades to let it grow. If you want to compress that accumulation phase into just 10 or 15 years...
Your savings rate has to go way, way up.
Dramatically. We're talking starting points of maybe 50% of your after-tax income, and serious FIRE followers often push that to 60%, sometimes even 70% or more.
70%. That's saving more than 2/3 of your take-home pay.
It's huge. And let's look at what that does to the timeline. The math is pretty stark. If you save 15%, like traditional advice suggests...
It takes maybe 35, 40 years to hit that FI number, roughly?
Around that, yeah, depending on returns. But if you crank that savings rate up to 50%...
How much does that cut it down?
You slash the timeline to about 17 years, roughly half the time.
Wow, okay. And if you manage that peak 70% rate...
Then you could potentially reach FI in something like 8 to 10 years.
8 years? That's incredible.
It shows how powerful the savings rate itself is, especially early on. When you're saving that much, the actual investment returns matter a bit less in the very short term. Your sheer savings volume is what's driving the rapid growth. It's the initial rocket fuel.
But saving 70%, that means you're living on just 30% of your income.
Yeah.
Which leads directly to pillar 2, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You cannot save 70% without embracing extreme frugality.
And we need to be clear, this isn't just packing a lunch instead of buying one.
No, no. This is frugality dialed up to 11. It's a really disciplined, very intentional lifestyle choice where every single dollar is accounted for and questioned. It's less about simple cost cutting, more about aggressive cost avoidance.
Okay, and to make a real dent, to get savings up that high, you have to tackle the big spending areas.
You absolutely have to. You can't get there by skipping lattes alone. You need to make huge cuts in the big three. Housing, transportation, and food. Those are usually the biggest drains on anyone's budget.
So what do the sources say? What are the extreme strategies here? Let's start with housing.
Okay, housing. The classic FIRE strategy, especially for younger people, is something called house hacking.
House hacking?
Yeah. Instead of buying a regular single-family home and paying the whole mortgage yourself, you buy a small multi-unit property, like a duplex or a triplex.
Okay.
You live in one of the units and you rent out the other 1 or 2 units.
So the rent from the tenants.
Ideally, it covers most or maybe even all of your mortgage payments. Sometimes, if you do it right, it can even generate positive cash flow.
So your housing cost effectively drops to zero, or you even make money from your house.
Exactly. While you're still building equity, it's a massive shortcut to reducing your biggest expense, often turning it into an income source while you're still saving.
That's clever. And intense. What about transportation? Cars are expensive.
Very. So extreme frugality here means getting rid of expensive car payments, high insurance, maybe even the car altogether if possible.
So biking, public transport.
Heavily relying on those, yes. Or if a car is absolutely necessary, buying something much older, reliable, maybe learning to do basic maintenance yourself. Definitely avoiding new cars like the plague. They're just depreciating assets.
And some people combine this with location, right?
Yes, that's geo-arbitrage. It's a powerful tool. Maybe you have a remote job that pays a salary based on a high-cost city like San Francisco or New York.
But you choose to live somewhere with a much lower cost of living.
Exactly. Maybe a smaller town or a different state or country. You keep the high income, but slash your expenses, widening that gap you can save.
Okay, housing, transport, now food. We're not just talking about cooking at home more often.
Oh, we're going way beyond that.
Yeah.
This is meticulous meal planning, buying staples, rice, beans, lentils in bulk, cooking almost everything from scratch.
Bulk cooking, maybe. Make meals for the whole week.
Often, yeah.
Huh.
Strategies to minimize food waste and even utility costs from cooking. The goal is to drive that per-person food budget way down, often aiming for like $200, $300 a month, maybe even less. Becomes purely functional fuel, not a source of regular discretionary spending or pleasure.
Wow. That requires serious discipline and
A
sacrifice.
huge sacrifice and constant planning, yes.
I have to jump in here. This level of intensity, it sounds rough. Our sources do mention the downsides, the criticisms. This kind of extreme frugality for a decade, doesn't that strain relationships,
Right.
social life, maybe even health if you're always picking the cheapest option?
That's a really important counterpoint, and the sources definitely highlight it. For some people, the huge motivation of early freedom makes it sustainable. They thrive on the challenge.
But for others?
For others, critics argue it's just trading one kind of stress for another. You swap financial worry for the constant stress of deprivation, maybe social isolation because so many activities cost money.
You need a partner who's totally on board too, I imagine.
Absolutely essential. And you have to be okay with missing out on things your friends might be doing. It really underscores the non-financial costs involved in chasing that early independence. It's not for everyone.
Well put. Okay, but assuming someone is managing this high savings rate through extreme frugality, that saved money can't just sit in a checking account.
Definitely not. That leads us to pillar 3. All that money you're saving, that 50, 60, 70% of your income has to be put to work immediately and aggressively.
Pillar 3, aggressive investing and compounding.
That's it. The saved capital gets systematically invested, usually as soon as it's available.
And when we say aggressively invested, what does that usually mean in the FIRE context? Are people trying to pick hot stocks or day trade?
Generally, no. That's too risky and time-consuming for this long-term strategy. The core approach is usually much simpler, investing heavily in broad-based, low-cost index funds.
Like a total stock market index fund.
Exactly. Or maybe an S&P 500 index fund. The goal is just to capture the overall growth of the market, keep fees incredibly low, and make it easy to manage. Kind of a set-it-and-forget-it approach, but with huge monthly contributions.
Okay, and then the magic happens. Compounding.
Yes. That's the engine that really makes the portfolio explode over time. We all know the snowball analogy, right?
Rolling downhill, picking up more snow.
Right. Your initial investments earn returns, Then those returns get reinvested and start earning their own returns, and so on. It creates exponential growth.
And the high savings rate turbocharges this.
Massively. Think about it. If you save a normal 15% and the market gives you, say, an 8% return, your snowball grows steadily. You're adding a bit more snow each year. But if you're saving 70%, you're starting with a huge snowball almost immediately, and you're dumping massive truckloads of new snow onto it every single month.
So the growth curve gets much deeper, much faster.
Way faster. Let's try numbers. Say you have $100,000 invested. A 10% return gives you $10,000. Next year, you earn 10% on $110,000 plus any new savings.
Standard compounding.
Right. But if, in that same year, you also forcefully inject $70,000 in new savings from your paycheck.
The growth isn't just from the market return, it's massively boosted by your own contributions.
Exactly. Your portfolio's growth rate in those early years is dominated by how much you save, not just market performance. This combination, the high savings fueling the compounding engine, that's what makes a 10 or 15-year timeline potentially achievable.
Okay, so those three pillars, high savings, frugality, aggressive investing, cover the accumulation phase, getting the money in.
Right, which is incredibly intense. But then for these early retirees, there's a whole other set of challenges when it comes to getting the money out, especially around taxes.
Yeah, because in many countries like the U.S., there are penalties for withdrawing from retirement accounts before a certain age, right?
Yeah.
59 and a half.
Exactly. And those penalties can be hefty, like 10%. So if your entire FIRE plan relies on money locked up in a 401k or a traditional IRA, just having the money isn't enough. You need a way to access it early without getting hammered by penalties.
So how do they do that? How do FIRE followers get that money out penalty-free at, say, age 40?
They have to use specific technical strategies that are perfectly legal ways around those early withdrawal penalties. The most common one you hear about is the Roth conversion ladder.
Okay, Roth conversion ladder. Sounds complicated.
It takes planning. Basically, you systematically move money from your pre-tax retirement accounts, like your traditional 401k or IRA, into a Roth IRA. You pay income tax on the amount you convert in that year.
Okay, so you pay tax now. Then what?
Then that converted money has to sit in the Roth IRA for 5 years. It's a 5-year seasoning period.
5 years.
After those 5 years have passed for a specific conversion amount, you can withdraw that converted principal amount, the original money you moved over, not the earnings on it, yet completely tax-free and penalty-free.
So you create a ladder by doing these conversions every year leading up to retirement.
Exactly. If you plan to retire at age 40, you need to do your first conversion at age 35. That money will then be available penalty-free at 40. Then the conversion you do at 76 becomes available at 41, and so on.
Wow, that requires serious foresight. You're planning the withdrawal logistics 5 years before you even quit your job.
Absolutely. And you have to carefully manage how much you convert each year to control the tax hit during the conversion years. It's detailed planning.
Is that the only way? Are there other methods?
There's another less common method called 72T distributions. It's also known as substantially equal periodic payments, or SEPPs.
Okay, how does that work?
This IRS rule allows you to take distributions from your retirement accounts before 59 and a half without the 10% penalty if you agree to take a series of fixed calculated payments over a long period.
Fixed payments?
Yes, the amount is calculated based on your life expectancy using IRS-approved methods. And crucially, once you start, you generally have to stick to that exact withdrawal schedule for at least 5 years, or until you turn 59 and a half, whichever is longer.
That sounds very rigid. What if you have an emergency or the market tanks and you want to take less?
That's the big drawback. You generally can't change the payment amount without potentially triggering retroactive penalties on all the distributions you've already taken, so the Roth ladder offers more flexibility.
Okay, so the reality check here is that FIRE isn't just about saving and investing. It's also about becoming a bit of a tax expert years in advance.
You definitely need to understand these mechanisms, but let's talk about other risks in withdrawal. Beyond the sequence risk we mentioned, what about just life? What happens if your spending needs change after you retire?
You mean lifestyle creep?
Exactly. That's a huge potential pitfall. You retire, maybe based on a lean $40,000 a year budget using the 4% rule. You're financially independent on paper. But then a few years into retirement, you've got all this time. Maybe you decide you want to travel more or pick up an expensive hobby. Or maybe unexpected health costs come up. Suddenly you find yourself needing or wanting to spend, say, $60,000 a year.
But your whole plan was based on $40K. That's a 50% jump in spending. What does that do to the plan?
It puts immense strain on it. You're now effectively trying to withdraw 6% of your initial portfolio value, 40K base 1M 1.5 equals 6%, not 4%. That higher withdrawal rate drastically increases the chances of running out of money, especially over a very long retirement.
So how do you fight lifestyle creep when you have potentially 50 years of retirement ahead of you?
Radical discipline, really, sticking to the budget. But it's tough. Human nature often pushes us to want a bit more comfort or enjoyment once the immediate financial stress is gone.
This is maybe why some critics are wary of the super lean, fiery approaches. They leave zero room for error or just wanting things.
That's a very common critique, yeah. An extremely lean budget is fragile. It doesn't take much unexpected inflation, a change in desire to break it.
It sounds like maybe the biggest threat to a long-term fire plan isn't always the stock market, but maybe yourself, your own changing needs or discipline.
That's often true. And there's another psychological challenge, kind of the flip side of lifestyle creep. It's sometimes called bore out.
Bore out, as in getting bored.
Yeah. You spend a decade, maybe more, hyper-focused on this single, all-consuming goal, reach the number, quit the job, then you do it. You retire at 40. And then
you have maybe 50 years stretching ahead with no built-in structure or required purpose.
Exactly. After years of intense striving, that sudden lack of obligation or external goal can be really jarring for some people. They struggle to find meaning or fill their days. The challenge shifts from achieving freedom to using freedom meaningfully.
That's a really interesting point. It's not just a financial puzzle, it's a life design puzzle too. Okay, so given all these challenges, the intensity, the risks, the potential for lifestyle creep or bore out, it makes sense that the FIRE movement isn't just one single thing anymore.
Right. It's definitely evolved. It's less all or nothing now. People have adapted the core ideas to fit different goals and risk tolerances. We talk about different flavors of FIRE.
And these different flavors, they directly impact things like how much you need to save, right? And also how you invest that money.
Absolutely. Your chosen flavor influences your target FI number, which influences your savings rate and timeline, and it also affects your asset allocation.
Asset allocation meaning how you divide your investments.
Yeah, the mix between different types of assets, primarily stocks, bonds, maybe some real estate or cash. How much risk you take in your portfolio often depends on which FIRE path you're aiming for.
Okay, let's look at the main flavors, starting with the most hardcore version.
That would be lean FIRE. This is the minimalist path. The absolute priority is gaining time freedom as fast as humanly possible.
And they achieve that speed by aiming for a lower spending level in retirement.
Exactly. They accept and maybe even prefer a permanently frugal, minimalist lifestyle. They're targeting the lowest possible FI number that lets them stop working.
So what kind of annual spending are we talking about for lean FIRE?
Sources often cite numbers like $25,000 to maybe $35,000 a year, sometimes even lower, depending on location and lifestyle choices.
Okay, so using the 4% rule, or maybe slightly more conservative, like 3.5%, what's the portfolio target?
You're looking at a portfolio somewhere in the range of, say, $625,000 on the very low end, 25K, 0.04, up to maybe $1 million, 35K, 0.035. It's a relatively small number compared to traditional retirement goals.
And the big advantage there is speed.
Speed is the main driver. Because the target is lower, you could potentially hit it much faster, maybe in that 8 to 12-year time frame, assuming a high savings rate.
But what about the risks with such a low spending level and a potentially 60-year retirement? How does that affect their asset allocation? Are they taking more risk?
They almost have to. To make that smaller portfolio last for so long and outpace inflation, lean FIRE folks often need to maintain a very high allocation to stocks, maybe 80% or even 90% equities, even well into retirement.
Because they need the higher growth potential of stocks.
Right. But that higher stock allocation makes them much more vulnerable to, you guessed it, sequence of returns risk. A big market downturn early on could be devastating. There's very little cushion or room for error in lean FIRE.
Okay, so lean FIRE is fast, but maybe fragile. What's the opposite end of the spectrum?
That would be fat FIRE. This is for people who want the financial independence, but they don't want to live a super frugal life in retirement.
They want the freedom and a comfortable, maybe even luxurious lifestyle.
Exactly. They're planning for retirement with plenty of room for travel, hobbies, dining out, maybe living in a higher cost of living area, helping out family, whatever. A more traditional, comfortable retirement spending level just achieved much earlier.
So their target FI number must be way bigger.
Oh, significantly bigger. A Fat Fire proponent might be aiming for annual expenses of $100,000, maybe $150,000, or even more.
Okay, we'll run the numbers. Using the 4% rule or maybe 3.5%.
You're talking portfolio targets of $2.5 million,
Yeah.
100K 0.04, up to maybe $4.3 million, 150K 0.035, or potentially higher.
Wow, that's a lot more saving required.
A lot more. Which means the accumulation phase for Fat Fire takes much longer. You're probably looking at 15, 20, maybe even 25 years of high saving and investing.
So you trade time for comfort and security.
That's the essence of it. But the huge advantage of Fat Fire is that the sheer size of the portfolio creates a massive safety buffer.
How does that impact their asset allocation?
They can afford to be more conservative. Someone with a $4 million portfolio supporting $150K in spending has more flexibility. They might hold a larger percentage in bonds or even cash, say 30% or 40% in these safer assets.
Which protects them better from market crashes.
Much better. It reduces volatility and cushions the blow from sequence of returns risk while still allowing them to maintain their desired lifestyle. Fat Fire buys financial resilience and lifestyle flexibility, but it costs you more time up front.
Okay, lean fire for speed, fat fire for comfort. What about something in between? Something that maybe addresses that burnout issue we talked about.
Right, that leads us to a really popular hybrid approach, Barista Fire.
Barista fire. I like the name. What's the idea here?
Barista Fire is kind of a halfway house. It acknowledges that the relentless push to full FI can be exhausting, and maybe full retirement isn't the immediate goal for everyone.
So what have they achieved at the barista fire stage?
They've saved enough money so that their investment portfolio can reliably cover all their essential, non-negotiable living expenses. Think housing, utilities, basic food, insurance premiums passively.
Okay, so the core survival needs are met by passive income.
Exactly. But they haven't saved enough yet to cover all their desired spending, like travel, hobbies, fun money. Or, critically, they haven't solved the health insurance problem yet.
Health insurance.
Yeah.
Especially in the US, that's a huge cost if you don't have an employer plan.
It's often the biggest barrier to early retirement. So, the Barista Fire strategy is you quit your high-stress full-time career because your basic needs are covered.
Freedom from the main grind.
Right. But then you intentionally take on part-time work, often something lower stress or more enjoyable.
Like working as a barista.
Hence the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, or working at a library, a bookstore, a national park, something you find fulfilling that maybe provides just enough extra income for the discretionary spending.
And crucially, often provides access to affordable health insurance benefits through that part-time employer.
That is very often the primary driver for Barista Fire. Solving the health insurance puzzle is key. You work just enough, maybe 10, 20 hours a week, to get those benefits and cover the extras.
So Barista Fire isn't really about stopping work completely.
Not necessarily. It's more about gaining control and eliminating obligatory work. It's about achieving the freedom to choose work you enjoy on your terms for fewer hours. Trading a bit of time for benefits and fun money while your core expenses are handled passively.
This sounds like it could be a good antidote to that bore-out risk, too. It keeps some structure and social connection.
It definitely appeals to people who worry about that. It allows them to ease into retirement, maybe pursue passion projects with most of their time, but still have some external engagement and income. It really highlights that FI is fundamentally about options, and retire early is just one possible option, not the only one. Hashtag conclusion and key takeaways.
Wow. Okay. We've covered a lot of ground there, from the core definition to the intense strategies and the different ways people approach this. Let's try to synthesize the key takeaways for everyone listening.
All right, so first off, 4 FIRE years stands for financial independence, retire early. But the Q part, the foundation, is achieving financial independence.
Which means having enough passive income generated from your investments or other assets.
To cover your annual living expenses without needing to work, that's the trigger point.
And the common benchmark for knowing how much you need is that 4% rule, or its inverse, the 25x rule.
Right. Aiming to save 25, or maybe more conservatively, 28 to 30 times your desired annual spending. That gives you your target number.
Then, getting to that number incredibly fast, maybe 10, 15 years, relies on those 3 pillars of intensity.
Pillar 1, an extremely high savings rate, often 50% to 70% of your after-tax income.
Pillar 2, Enabled by extreme frugality, slashing costs in housing, transport, and food, often using techniques like house hacking or geo-arbitrage.
And pillar 3, aggressively investing those savings, usually in low-cost index funds, to harness the power of compounding.
We also touched on the crucial but complex withdrawal phase challenges.
Yeah, needing strategies like the Roth conversion ladder or 72T distributions to access retirement funds early without penalties, and managing risks like sequence of returns and lifestyle creep.
And finally, we saw that fire isn't monolithic, it has different flavors.
Right, lean fire for maximum speed via minimalism, fat fire for more comfort and security but taking longer, and barista fire as a hybrid, gaining control and covering essentials while working part-time for benefits and extras.
So, when you step back and look at the whole movement, what's the deeper meaning here? What's the so what? It feels like it's about more than just money or quitting a job.
I think that's right. Ultimately, FIRE is a really focused strategic effort to buy back your time, your life energy.
Reclaiming your hours.
Exactly. It's fundamentally about having options. The goal isn't necessarily to sit on a beach doing nothing forever, though you could. It's about gaining the autonomy to decide how you spend your days.
So maybe focusing on family or health or learning something new or starting a passion project.
All of the above. Retire early is just one possible choice you have once you achieve financial independence. The real prize is the freedom to choose. It's rejecting the default path and intentionally designing your life.
It's purchasing control over your life's narrative.
That's a good way to put it. You're making a very deliberate trade, intense effort and sacrifice for a relatively short period.
In exchange for potentially decades of freedom and control later on.
That's the core transaction.
Which brings us perfectly to our final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. The entire FIRE movement hinges on this fundamental trade-off. We've seen the intensity required, the extreme frugality, the potential social sacrifices, the years of rigid financial focus.
So the question becomes, is that intense short-term sacrifice truly worth the long-term prize? Is the freedom gained at the end worth the potential cost to your quality of life during the accumulation phase? Or does the relentless nature of the pursuit risk undermining the very happiness you hope to achieve in retirement?
It's a deeply personal calculation with no single right answer. Something for you to consider.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into financial independence. Retire early. We hope breaking down the mechanics, the strategies, and the nuances gives you a clearer picture of what this movement entails.
Until next time, keep digging deeper and keep learning.
Welcome back to The Critique. We're here to help refine your sharpest thinking.
That's right.
Today, we're looking at a really solid piece outlining the FIRE strategy, Financial Independence Retire Early. You've submitted an excellent overview covering its 3 core pillars: high savings rate, extreme frugality, and aggressive investing.
Yeah, a very strong foundation. Clearly gets the mechanics.
Absolutely. So our goal today isn't about the basics. You've got those down. It's about enhancing the intellectual robustness, making it even more compelling for the reader.
Strengthening the framework.
Exactly. We've pinpointed 3 areas where we think a little expansion, a bit more nuance, could really elevate it.
Okay, let's jump in.
All right, first up, let's talk about the engine behind those high savings rates. Okay, so to maintain intellectual rigor and give a complete picture, the discussion really should acknowledge the foundational role of income generation. It's like a prerequisite for the other 3 pillars.
Right, before you can even start saving aggressively.
Precisely. The piece does a great job explaining the how, the mechanics of saving, investing, hitting that 50, even 70% savings rate, which is, classic FIRE.
That figure always jumps out.
It does. But here's the weakness, right? That extreme rate, it's, functionally impossible for most people without a pretty high base income to start with.
Yeah, you can't save 70% of a low wage, no matter how frugal you are. The math just doesn't work.
Exactly. So by focusing almost entirely on cutting expenses, optimizing the denominator, the framework kind of omits how you achieve the necessary large input, the income.
Which risks making the whole strategy seem universally accessible just through discipline alone.
When actually, it's often heavily dependent on earning potential first. It's like the prestige paradox of FIRE. The high savings rate looks amazing, but it's often the high income doing the heavy lifting underneath.
That's a really important tension to address, I think. We need to be upfront about that mathematical leverage.
Yeah.
The material kind of assumes the reader already has that solid income stream. But for the framework to be really complete, we need to explicitly connect the input to the output.
Makes sense.
I mean, optimizing expenses is crucial, no doubt. But for someone to save, say, $50,000 a year, they first have to earn considerably more than that.
Right.
If we only talk about cutting costs, we kind of ignore the biggest lever most people have, which is actually increasing their earnings.
Okay, so what's the suggestion for improvement there?
Well, I think the argument gets much stronger if you either explicitly define maybe a fourth pillar focused on maximizing income.
Maybe.
Or, and this might be cleaner, clearly frame the three existing pillars as optimization tactics that are really contingent on hitting a certain earning potential first.
I like that framing. It keeps the elegance of the three pillars, but adds that crucial context.
Yeah, it shifts the focus a bit. Not just surviving on less, but strategically earning enough to really speed things up.
So, concrete examples, how could they weave this in?
You could briefly touch on specific strategies, show you've considered the whole ecosystem,
Like what?
Like discuss career optimization. Maybe talk about aggressively pursuing high-value professional skills, or negotiating better salaries, things like that.
Okay.
Or you could mention geographical arbitrage. That's a big one in the FIRE community, right?
Definitely. Moving somewhere cheaper while keeping a high remote salary.
Exactly. It instantly juices that input-output ratio. Adding examples like these just cements the piece's authority, shows you understand the real-world constraints and enablers.
Good. That really shores up the foundation. So if income is the road quality, our second critique tackles the long-term stress of driving on that road under, let's say, pretty intense conditions.
Okay, the frugality piece.
Yes. We need to inject more contextual nuance into that extreme frugality segment. Need to bring in counter-arguments, acknowledge the real-world trade-offs involved in such a massive lifestyle change.
Makes sense. It's not always easy.
Now, I appreciate that the piece already reframes frugality positively as conscious spending, not deprivation. That's a great angle, much more sustainable psychologically.
Yeah, that's a common and helpful reframing.
But the weakness, I think, is that this positive focus kind of ignores the potential friction points. The difficulty of maintaining that extreme austerity for, a decade, maybe more.
Right. We're talking about things like house hacking, driving really old cars for years, maybe severely limiting social spending.
Exactly. Presenting it as purely beneficial, purely a matter of smart choices, overlooks some pretty significant psychological and social realities. The idea of frugality fatigue is real for a lot of people on this path.
That's the core issue, isn't it? FIRE isn't just a spreadsheet exercise. It's deeply psychological. It involves human resilience. So if you present extreme frugality without acknowledging its potential costs, its downsides, the piece can feel a little, naive, maybe? A bit too rah-rah?
Yeah, potentially.
We need to add some intellectual complexity. Show the reader you've already thought about the common criticisms, the sustainability questions. You need to address the potential fragility of the system when it meets real-life psychological pressure.
Okay, so how do we suggest they do that? How do they introduce that complexity without undermining the core idea?
Well, this is actually a great chance to deepen the discussion. You could integrate points about the different kinds of FIRE. Add some necessary weight there.
Contrasting the models, like lean FIRE versus fat FIRE?
Exactly. Use those contrasting models to illustrate the different psychological burdens.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, you could contrast the intense austerity often needed for lean FIRE, where you have to relentlessly minimize every single expense, pretty much forever, with the stability and, frankly, the spending buffer you get with fat FIRE.
Right. Lean FIRE sounds exhausting.
It requires immense psychological fortitude, because any unexpected expense, even a small one, can feel like it's derailing the whole plan. That leads directly to that frugality fatigue you mentioned.
Whereas fat FIRE?
Fat FIRE inherently gives you more permission to spend, more freedom, because the safety margin is just so much bigger. Less day-to-day stress about every dollar.
That's a really useful distinction to draw out.
And you could go further. Maybe ask explicitly, does focusing only on optimizing the big three, housing, transport, food, potentially lead to social isolation?
when extreme cost-cutting clashes with social norms or family expectations?
Precisely. By touching on these trade-offs, these real-world frictions, you offer a much more realistic, more nuanced perspective on the true sacrifice involved.
And that actually makes the success stories more powerful later on.
Totally. Because the reader understands the cost of admission. It moves the discussion from just cheerleading to, sophisticated strategic analysis.
That level of honesty really boosts credibility. Yeah. It turns the section from just describing the accumulation phase into a strategic guide on how to endure it.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Now, for our third and final critique, let's look at the aggressive investing pillar and how we can mathematically tie everything together. Close the loop.
Right. Connecting the saving and investing to the actual goal.
Yes. So, to mathematically complete the narrative, the discussion of aggressive investing needs to clearly establish the specific calculation or metric, the magic number that connects all that intense saving to the final goal, financial independence.
The finish line.
Exactly. The piece correctly talks about compounding being the engine, low-cost index funds being the vehicle. That's all spot on.
Standard FIR playbook stuff.
Right. But it stops a bit short. It says the goal is just to build enough assets to live off the passive income.
Vague.
Yeah. The critical weakness here is that the formula that determines how much money is actually enough is just absent. Which leaves this logical gap, right, between the massive saving effort in pillars 1 and 2 and the actual required portfolio size in pillar 3. The reader is left optimizing this intense journey without a clearly defined destination.
That's a pretty significant gap. It kind of undermines the authority, doesn't it, if you don't define the target?
I think so.
The mathematical relationship is really the capstone of the whole thing. Without it, the reader can't calculate their own timeline or even fully grasp the power of cutting their expenses.
So we need that mathematical finalizer. What's the suggestion here?
Simple, really. Integrate the withdrawal strategy, link the aggressive investing pillar directly to how you'll eventually use the money.
Okay.
We should integrate the standard mathematical relationship, usually known as the 4% safe withdrawal rule, as the final step of Pillar 3. This shows directly how the savings rate, which is fueled by the high income, and the extreme frugality immediately defines the portfolio target size.
Right. And just to quickly anchor that for listeners, the 4% rule basically suggests you can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio's value in the first year of retirement, then adjust that amount for inflation each year after with a high probability of the money lasting.
Precisely. A rule of thumb based on historical data.
So how does the writer make that actionable in the piece?
They should clearly state the resulting equation. The required portfolio size equals 25 times your planned annual expenses.
Ah, the 25x rule. That's the magic number.
That's the magic number. Putting that equation in gives tangible context to that earlier insight you mentioned was brilliant. The idea that cutting expenses works on 2 levels.
Say more about that.
Well, stating the 25x rule makes it crystal clear. Reducing your expenses not only speeds up how fast you can save, that's pillars 1 and 2, but maybe even more profoundly, it fundamentally shrinks the necessary final portfolio target itself, pillar 3.
Ah, because your annual expenses are lower, so 25 times that number is also lower?
Exactly. Give an example. Someone spending $60,000 a year needs a $1.5 million portfolio, 60K times 25.
Okay.
But if they use extreme frugality, maybe get their spending down to $40,000 a year, suddenly their target portfolio is only $1 million 40K 25.
Wow, they just cut $500,000 off their goal.
Right, while also freeing up more money to save faster toward that smaller goal. Showing that dual impact mathematically really finalizes the narrative flow. It shows how all 3 pillars powerfully converge on this single quantified objective.
That really ties it all together nicely. Makes the whole strategy click into place mathematically.
Yeah, it completes the picture.
Okay, this has been a really productive critique, I think, focused on boosting the overall intellectual strength and completeness of the submission.
Agreed. Good stuff to work with.
So just to quickly recap the main opportunities we discussed, 3 key areas. First, really bolstering that foundational discussion of income generation as a prerequisite.
making that explicit.
Second, injecting more nuance and realism into the extreme frugality section, talking about the psychological trade-offs, maybe using lean versus fat fire as examples.
Acknowledging the human element.
And third, explicitly defining the final mathematical target using the safe withdrawal rate, like the 4% rule or the 25x expenses calculation, to really close that logical loop.
Nail down the finish line.
Exactly.
And look, these adjustments, they won't change the core message, which is already strong, but they will dramatically enhance the logical completeness, the intellectual robustness of the framework.
Right.
It moves it from being a really solid descriptive analysis to, I think, a highly authoritative and truly complete strategic guide.
Well said. We really look forward to seeing how you integrate these ideas.
Yeah, definitely.
Please feel free to send your revised work back in anytime for another critique.